Ahoy! Ahoy! Good morning, everybody. How wonderful it is to see you today, in spite of this horrible weather that we've been having. And I welcome our guest speaker, Phoebe. Tell you a little bit more about her afterwards. And I welcome those of you who are online as well. That's perfect, Jim. I'd like to call upon Judith. Please say a blessing, please. You don't have a mic,
Let's all just be quiet for a few minutes. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for gathering us in today on this very cold day. Thank you that there have been so many miracles over the last few days. Thank you for 20 sailors' lives saved from a cargo ship grounded off the west coast of Newfoundland. Thank you for 80 lives saved for an aircraft flipping upside down at our airport. We are grateful, all of us, to be here after many days of snowstorms and traffic jams, but we come together in friendship and fellowship. Thank you for our guest speaker today, for her words. And we ask you to bless this time together. Of all those at home, especially Julia. And we thank you that she is still with us via Zoom. And we also pray for the Virgil family and Chloe. We ask you to bless this food that we are about to receive to our use and us to your service. We're grateful for the many hands who have prepared to serve it. Keep us ever mindful of the needs of others.
And the toast to His Majesty the King. The King. And sailors everywhere.
And sailors everywhere.
So welcome again, everybody. It's so good to see you here. I'm glad that you faced the weather and the roads and the traffic and I have piles of snow 6 feet plus in front of my house. And I had I'm very grateful to my neighbor who dug my car this evening. Amazing. So a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which this building is standing is the traditional territory of many nations. We honor and thank the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and that confederacy comprises of the Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, the Cayugas, and the Senecas. And also the Huron-Wendat peoples and the many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples now living in Toronto. I've asked you to turn your cell phones off, please. Just a reminder, so you can hear interrupted. And a reminder that we have Zoom meetings afterwards for those of you who are online. I will give you biographical introduction of Phoebe in a couple of minutes. I thank you for the annual donations that still continue to come in. Remembering that those donations, use the money, they go to charity. Our trivia today: Halcyon piscator, or kingfisher, name of the bird. This beautiful bird's floating nest was able to calm the winds and the seas while the bird sat on the nest. When this situation occurred in winter, it gave rise to the expression halcyon days. So now you know where that comes from. Never knew one. And now we're going to do the shanty on page 19.
The toast?
Pardon me?
We done the toasts?
Yeah, yes, we did. Thank you for the reminder, though. I have really good people here today. Good reminders. In any event, we're doing the shanty, The Mermaid, which is not one that is totally common to us. We don't do it very often. Oscar Brand is going to be on the screen, or we won't actually, his voice will be coming through the screen. And there is one extra verse. After the second verse, there's another one that he will put in. And you can come along if you want. But it's not written in our hymn. So the words may be slightly different, like clearly. Okay.
Page 19.
Page 19, thank you, page 19.
Was Friday morn and we set sail. We were not far from the land, when the captain he spied a lovely mermaid, with a comb and a glass in her hand. Oh, the ocean waves may roll and roll, and the stormy winds may blow, let her blow, while we poor sailors go skipping to the tops, and the landlubbers lie down below, 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 and the landlubbers lie down below. Then up spoke the captain of our gallant ship, and a well-spoken man was he. I have married me a wife in Salem town, tonight she a widow will be. Oh, the ocean waves may roll, let her roll, and the stormy winds may blow, let her blow, while we poor sailors go skipping to the tops, and the landlubbers lie down below, 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 and the landlubbers lie down below. And up spoke the cabin boy of our gallant ship, and a well-spoken cabin boy was he. I've a father, I've a mother in Boston town, tonight they childless will be. Oh, the ocean waves may roll, let her roll, and the stormy winds may blow, let her blow, while we poor sailors go skipping to the tops, and the landlubbers lie down below, 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 and the landlubbers lie down below. Then 3 times around went our gallant ship, 3 times around went she. Yes, 3 times around went our gallant ship, then she sank to the bottom of the sea. Oh, the ocean waves may roll, let her roll, and the stormy winds may blow, let her blow, while we poor sailors go skipping to the tops, and the landlubbers lie down below, 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 and the landlubbers lie down below.
Well, actually, it's a sad song when you think about it, like that. Mom ends up down in the drink, and as does everybody else. And just for you, Phoebe, I'm not sure how familiar you are with shanties, but shanties were sung on ships in order for people to roll the lines in and have the rhythm, and this is a perfect example of the rhythm of a shanty. Okay, and so now let me introduce, oh, by the way, I brought some more books in, so if you want to take a look, you may take some of those books on with you. And when I say some of them, do that. I'm going to call some and put them in the book box, that I have at home to go to charity. So, all right. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Phoebe, and I thank Graham for introducing her to me. She took a course, a small but mighty English program, and it was amazingly successful at preparing students for careers and in arts and science. And Phoebe wrote that herself. She marvels at the heights reached in a short time by her small but mighty band of fellow graduates. They were all part of this Arts and Science English Masters of Arts program launched in 2004, aimed at preparing students for careers as professional writers. Phoebe is the author of 2 collections of poems, including Admission Requirements, which was nominated for the Trillium Book Award and Waking Occupations. And actually, what she's talking about today is her third book. A former writer in residence at the University of New Brunswick, she has been poetry editor with the Fiddlehead and Brick Books, and is a consultant at Oakland University. Over the past few years, she also returned home to the Arts and Science Creative Writing Program as an adjunct faculty member. And so you say, what about sailing? She shares deep bonds with a wide network of students, mentors, and alumni, a kind of echolocation. She keeps graduates intersecting socially and professionally, and she still workshops with one exceptionally close group of classmates more than a decade after graduation. She has worked on and has finished a book of essays about colonialism and the sailing culture of Lake Ontario, a passion she discovered after an editor reached out with an unexpected assignment. At the time, I didn't feel qualified. I was new to the sport, and my family hadn't done it for generations. But now I've been sailing for about 12 years, and I've done my race officer's training with Ontario Sailing. There aren't a lot of women of color who sail, and the book collection has grown out of the idea of how sailing has become part of my identity. I feel like more people should know how accessible it is. Please give Phoebe
Talk
or
a little louder.
Shellback welcome.
Talk a little louder.
Okay. So that means you have to talk a little louder because we don't have a microphone.
No, if the microphone won't help us Zoom.
No.
Thank you so much, Diane, for that introduction, and thank you, Graham, for inviting me to do this talk. I have very fond feelings towards National, especially because I did my dinghy classes here a couple of summers ago, I have an essay actually about the week-to-week, adventures of that capsizing. But I was very impressed with the dinghy fleet because they bought new quests for us that year, and they were very durable, very lightweight, really fun to sail. Pretty much found the wind, even in what we called I guess the washing machine that would just spin us around to corners, and then we would struggle because if you could make it out of this little harbor here, and get out of the lake, that was the half the battle, and we learned a lot doing that. So yes, my essay collection came out last fall, and I've now been a sailor for 15 years, and I got into it very, very accidentally through my roommate at that time. When I moved to Toronto, my roommate was Mark McCrae, who is now the Rear Commodore of Queen City Yacht Club. But at that time, he had just bought a secondhand Niagara, and just invited friends and family, neighbors, roommates, whoever had time to come do race nights with him. So that's how I began sailing, because it was just an opportunity that I thought, when I'm ever going to get this chance again. So I crewed with him for about a decade, and then kind of started to get, I think since the pandemic, I got much more invested in sailing, and it became much more something that gave me a lot of joy and mental health benefits, and something I missed a lot. I didn't miss anything else. I didn't miss shopping. I didn't miss travel even. I just missed sailing so much during that time. And so it was after that time I began to take courses, had the privilege of doing assistant race officer training with Graham, as well as some other amazing instructors. And then that was kind of when my friend Andrew approached me about possibly writing this book, and I was very reluctant because I myself love reading sailing books, and usually they're by people who've sailed America's Cup, or who've circumnavigated the globe, or who have multi-generational family. But my friend Andrew said to me that my perspective was valuable because I was such a newcomer to the sport. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I can do it, if I can sail, anyone can sail. You don't need to be very physically fit. And I was also in the perfect environment, both the Lake Ontario Sailing Community and Queen City Yacht Club. So that's kind of what the book is about. It's pretty basic in terms of technical knowledge for you as an audience for such experienced sailors, but perhaps it might give like a more poetic look at things like sailing terminology, points of sail, relative to wind, capsizing, being becalmed or stuck in iron. So I have an essay about each of those things. And so I tried to do something different with every essay. So the one I'm gonna read about 10 minutes from an essay that is just almost like a historical essay. I have a background in English literature. I did my BA in English and my master's in English and creative writing. So I really do enjoy doing research as well. I don't often get the opportunity. So I do have an essay kind of on the history of Queen City Yacht Club. But it really is, when I was looking for the original clubhouse, it really became about an essay about Toronto. And I'm not from Toronto originally. I'm from Ottawa. My parents are from Hong Kong. So I kind of resisted learning about Toronto because I'm like, oh, everyone writes about Toronto. But it was such a fascinating look at the changing landscape, and I learned so much about Toronto's character through that. So this essay, and then I'll read for about 10-15 minutes, and then I'll do a presentation on some of the more interesting historical bits, some maps, some archival material that I found. And this is a photo of me racing on the Niagara. And my skipper won't like this because we're not reading. So I'm in the red jacket. I always try to wear a bright color because I'm on foredeck, and I find that having a bright rain jacket makes it easier for the crew to see where I am, the spot where I am. And then actually we're being beaten by some very impressive competition. The boat ahead of us is One More Time, who was sailed by Pat Wedding's crew, and she was a Rear Commodore, a Japanese Canadian, when I joined Queen City in 2009 or so. And then the boat ahead of that, the J22, I think it's maybe Dan Smith, who's the current Commodore, very, very good racer. He would beat everybody, you know, he would beat boats 5 or 6 feet bigger than him. Him and his a wife, Jess, they're amazing, amazing sailors. So this is this is what we have to deal with, you know, in the harbor with all this to distract us, you know. Okay, so buried timber. I'm looking for a Clendenning Row. It's a row of boat builders, sailing clubs, and rowing clubs on the vanished wharves of Toronto's Victorian harbourfront. One summer evening in 1889, a group of sailors met in a boathouse locker to discuss the formation of a new sailing club that would become the Queen City Yacht Club. History doesn't record the atmosphere upstairs over the dinghy lockers in the boathouse at 99 and 100 Clendenning Row on July 17, 1889, wrote the late club historian and journalist Wayne Lilly. Thanks to his rigorously researched centennial history of the club, I can come up with an approximate location of Clendenning Road, south of Union Station at the foot of York Street. It's an area I know well, crisscrossed by streetcar tracks, sandwiched by Queen Quay's Terminal and Harbor Square Park West. Yet despite the factualness of Lilly's work, I'm not satisfied. I'm in search of what is omitted from the records. Clendenning doesn't appear on any current map of Toronto, though it sounds like it should. It's a surname of Scottish and Irish origins with many variations, such as Glendinning, Glendon, and Clendenin, which are all attached to current roads and areas traversed by early immigrants. Though maps are meant for wayfinding, I can also lose myself in them, in the scale they commit to, the rigorous naming. I collect museum floor plans, tourist maps with exaggerated landmarks, and gentle, muted, illustrated maps of gardens. I want to live in the revelation that takes place when a map's approximation and a place that is being mapped meet and dissolve into each other. It's impossible to orient oneself by maps only, but nonetheless, I keep making the attempt. Clicking through an online repository of Toronto maps, I'm disoriented by history. There's no Gardiner or Don Valley Parkway. Ashbridges Bay is marshland, and from the mouth of the Don to the Humber, numerous wharves crowd the harborfront. The arteries of the Grand Trunk Railway run from east to west and branch outward along routes that will become subway and streetcar tracks. I pore over city engineer and fire insurance maps, but they don't show me streetscapes, warehouses, or horse carriages. The Toronto of the 1880s and 1890s exists only in street names, remnants of architecture, brickwork quarries now filled in by ponds, and the pale inks of the archive. In each of these maps, I start like many Toronto visitors at Union Station. I zoom in, trying to locate Clendening Row or any street south of the station. But I hadn't realized that today's Union Station is the third iteration of the building, evidence of the city's early tendency to outgrow and remake its landmarks. The first station was built in 1853, just west of the current station's train shed at Station and Front Streets. But the three single-story buildings with gently sloping roofs were no longer big enough to meet Toronto's population surge in the 1870s and was replaced by an 1873 by a grand Second Empire-style building designed by architect Thomas Seton Scott. It's a block-wide stone building with three towers, a clock face, Palladian windows, and decorative embellishments. This Union Station faced south on the corner of Esplanade West and Simcoe, highlighting the importance of water transportation at the time. To the south on these Victorian maps, I find the Royal Canadian Yacht Club, Toronto Canoe Club, and the Argonaut Rowing Club perched at the former shoreline. Before this, I had no idea that Argonaut Rowing Club had such a long history and that they were located at that location there. These maps show wharves that no longer exist stretching out on the lake. I try to imagine Toronto's lakeshore messy with warehouses, sheds, and boat traffic. Wharves were used for sailboats and steamboats, cargo, passenger traffic, rescue operations, and printing operations, acting as the vestibule of the city. In pen and ink drawings, watercolors, lithographs, steel engravings, and images developed from glass plate negatives, the waterfront of Victorian Toronto looks like a rough, active place. Like a shifting set of tiles, the city's streets and landmarks flip over in a centuries-long game, revealing new configurations. Even as the grid of property lots, factories, warehouses, government buildings, courthouses, roads, and wharves were filling up, they were also being revised and redrawn. Present-day Toronto residents believe the city's lost and buried sites, trying to locate them again. There are the buried creeks, the lakeshore trail of the 1790s, which followed the topography from the sandbar that led to the islands to the Grenadier Pond to the Humber, used by Indigenous peoples and early settlers. The waterfront wharves demolished when the shoreline extended. The Toronto Historical Association lists 250 lost sites, places that have been buried, demolished, or destroyed by fire. In the burning of York in 1813, in the Great Fire of Toronto in 1849, and the Second Great Fire in Toronto in 1904 that razed 100 buildings in the industrial center. Today, iconic buildings continue to be threatened by condo development or city planning. Toronto's residents, dazed by the speed of construction, fight to preserve the city's beloved landmarks. But the maps show that restlessness has been a feature of the city since its beginnings. Everywhere you go in Toronto, something is buried. I realize I'm looking for more than an address or the location of Queen City's former clubhouses. I'm hoping that the club's history and origins might give me a better understanding of how I fit in and how I orient myself. I'm familiar with the Toronto Purchase of 1787, but I'm still unsettled by 1805 map of Toronto. The city is but an outline, a black rectangle stretching from Lake Ontario to King Street, covering the 250,808 acres of the Toronto Purchase. Delicately drawn Carrying Place route is the only road on the map, implying a void to be filled. The 1813 Williams sketch of the ground in advance of and including York Upper Canada map shows a small grid of streets in the center of York, as Toronto was then called, and estates and farms to the state's west, surrounded by woodland and bush. The growth of the city accelerates and becomes denser through the decades. In the 1851 J.O. Brown map of the township of York, the land has been divided into concessions and lots. Nathan Ng, who has collected this online archive of Toronto maps, writes that in the 1850 land boom era was a time of prosperity, when speculators bought, sold, and subdivided lots for profit. The maps of this period, made by civil servants, engineers, and licensed surveyors, reveal the results of constant construction. Apartment buildings, Government House, and City Hall, the older garrison and the new garrison, University of Toronto, the Royal Observatory, also known as the Magnetic Observatory, which I had no idea there was like a Royal Observatory at U of T. I don't know what happened to it. Yeah, I try to find that building sometime. But they also built at the time Osgood Hall, the Provincial Lunatic Asylum, which is today's Center for Addiction and Mental Health building on Queen Street, and those became Toronto's fixed landmarks. At last, on an 1889 fire insurance map, I see W.H. Glendinning written below, built builder across a rectangular building. These fire insurance maps are the most detailed that I've found. The notations Canoe Club and Boat Club may refer to Toronto Canoe Club, Royal Canadian, and the Argonaut Rowing Club. Some letters are in ink, some in careful pencil. The QCYC website houses archival materials, including 1890 images of simple two-story boathouses with sturdy pitched roofs and what looks like rows of leaded windows. Union Station's tower adorns the background. I enlist current Queen City Club historian Richard Slee to help me locate the boat lockers of Glendinning Road. He informs me that not only have the streets and buildings changed, but the waterfront as well. Toronto's waterfront used to be located at Front Street, about a kilometer from its present-day location. The city has created additional room by filling in the waterfront since the early days of the 1850s, when we started to see the advent of the railways. By the 1890s, it had made its way down to Lake Street, where the old Union Station just to the north of the rail lines emails me, surmising that today, Glendinning Road would now be located between Simcoe and York Streets, just under the present Gardner Expressway. Which means that every time I walked south to the bottom of York Street and waited impatiently at the pedestrian crossings before the Gardner on-ramp, I was unknowingly stepping over the very roots of the club. I'm just gonna jump ahead a little bit, maybe write another small section. Okay, yeah. Like many Toronto tenants, QCYC searched for a permanent residence it could afford. The members initially rented out 3 boathouses on Glendinning Road for $140 a year. A few years later, in 1891, a special committee was formed to discuss a possible new clubhouse, but they couldn't locate any suitable grounds, nor was the club able to afford a purchase. Instead, they leased their current location, their rent leaping to $250 a year. In return for the steep rent hike, their landlords added new doors and a floating platform for launching boats. Queen City QCYC Limited was originally incorporated in August 1889 under the City of Toronto. Richard informed me that at the turn of the last century, establishing a social club and a corporation that held assets and issued shares was a popular move amongst gentlemen of the day. He also explained that some members served on both this club and the City of Toronto boards, leading to some interesting arguments about who is going to fix the assets. Despite the organization's working-class reputation, some Queen City board members held considerable power and influence, which they might have used to benefit the club. I recall the harried, homeless feeling I had when I stored all my worldly belongings in my uncle's basement while apartment hunting. Perhaps Queen City's members felt similarly when they deposited the club furniture into storage at 42 Church Street before leasing a new building owned by the Argonaut Boat Club at the foot of York Street for $200 a year. With space rented on the Argonaut Pier just north of the Toronto Canoe Club, a new 3-story building costing $2,000 celebrated its opening in August 1802. It was designed by architect and club member E.J. Lennox, who also designed Casa Loma, Toronto City Hall, and the Bank of Toronto, and many other iconic buildings in its distinctly ornate Richardsonian Romanesque style. From its beginnings, QCYC drew on the varied talents of its members. The squarish wooden building with the upper floor balcony and residence for the steward on the third floor looks simpler than Lennox's industrial buildings. Lennox was well known for combining different architectural styles, and the new QCYC clubhouse had a Queen Anne style sense of functionality and stateliness. A photo shows its balcony packed with Edwardian ladies in wide-brimmed hats and a row of spectators in dark suits and straw boater hats. Their backs to the photographer as they watch a swimming event. Skiffs with half-raised mainsails are nestled along the side of the clubhouse where more members perch, and in the distance, double-hanging dinghies pass along the side, the hazy outline of a passenger vessel. The scene is energetic and amusing, and you can almost hear the joking commentary and feel the sun on wooden backs. This handsome clubhouse wasn't destined to last. A few years before the outbreak of the First World War, the Toronto Harbor Commission saw the need for an expanded waterfront with more land between the rail lines and dock walls for larger commercial ships that it anticipated, rather than a mishmash of wharves. It forcibly encouraged recreational clubs and organizations to relocate to lands near the Western Gap, offering QCYC thousands of dollars to move. But Tommy World, the Commodore at the time, preferred the location of Toronto Island, and the club put off a decision. By 1920, dredging operations were underway, removing sand from the middle of the harbor to create deeper ports and to infill the shoreline. As well, Ashbridge's Bay Marsh was reclaimed, and 650 acres of new land was set to be created on Toronto Island. QCYC members had connected with the Wards Island Association to gain support and decided to move the club to the then named Sunfish Island, hoping to float the clubhouse across. These hopes crashed into the harbor when a piling beneath the clubhouse collapsed one July afternoon in 1920. Dredging had destabilized the harbor bottom, and as a result, the clubhouse's first story tipped into the harbor. In photos, the wooden roof is intact but askew, and one corner of the frame leans into the harbor as if the clubhouse was about to go for a swim. The noise of the crash and the sound of the water rushing into the first floor windows must have shocked the steward and his family, who managed to escape. The piano and club trophies were saved, but the clubhouse itself was later scrapped. Torontonians read about the disaster in the July 8 issue of the Toronto Daily Star. Queen City Yacht Club collapses, reads the headline, and a brief article follows. The Star photographer shows the wrecked building of the QCYC, foot of York Street, which collapsed yesterday owing to the rotting of the old wooden woodwork underneath it. The boats and dinghies in the north end of the structure are now underwater. No one was hurt, though the steward, E. Simpkins, was in the building at the time and had to escape through an upper window. The club reached an out-of-court settlement that was used to fund its new clubhouse on Sunfish Island. This long spit had been expanded to Algonquin Island using sand dredged from the harbor bottom. Toronto's land claim projects had caused QCYC to lose one home and to gain a new one. Yeah, I'll just end there, but I kind of continue talking about the construction of that new clubhouse and kind of trying to imagine this young group of sailors that had split off from Royal Canadian Yacht Club because they felt a Royal was becoming too much of a keelboat club. And so, but then when I looked into the 14 or 18 or so founding members of the club, they were all in their 20s. They were all in their 20s. They were so young. They were all married. They married at like 21. Some of them had kids and houses. So it was just fascinating to think, oh, when we think of the past, I tend to think of people with a lot of accomplishments, but these were just a group of guys, working class that, got together and started a club within 6 months. So that was really fascinating to learn. It made me feel much more closer to history. Should I be yours? Okay. Yeah, let's keep going because we've already covered me. This is me on board Panache on the foredeck getting soaked when my skipper used to race everything. And this is the image of the this is a Rapids Queen. It's like I believe it was a passenger or transport ship that we use as a breakwater, but I took a photo because I love the herons, and this is just kind of coming out of the lagoon here. What I did with this book, because I'd never written a nonfiction book before, and I was a bit daunted by the task, and I asked my editor, you know, what's the word count I should aim for? And he said, oh, about 60,000 words. So that seems such a huge amount to me that I thought, let's break it down. So let's say I want to write 20 essays. That would be about, you know, an average of maybe 1,500 to 8,000 words per essay. And so what I did was just very quickly, I made a spreadsheet. I just brainstormed the titles for different essay topics: almond racing, regatta racing, women's skipper race, dinghy classes, sailing on the bigger boats, perf. I wanted to do an essay on perf, dry land training and badlands and things like that, volunteering and profile. So and then I estimated word count, and then I just made some notes on what I wanted the essay to be about. And then I saw when I added up the word count, it was about 60,000 words. So that broke it down and made it a lot easier. And then I decided how much I could write a week. So for me, about 500 words. Every 500 words takes me about an hour or about 2 hours to write every day, but I don't do that every day. So I thought, okay, well, with my job, I could probably write 3 or 4 times a week. So that got me about 1,500 words a day, which was very manageable. And I often wrote more because I sometimes would get to almost the end of the essay and I would feel like I wanted to finish it. So I just made that writing schedule. Once I had this done, I wrote my book proposal, which was a synopsis of the book and my approach. And then I kind of decided what kind of research I needed for each of these things. So research I kind of realized I needed quite a wide range of research. I needed material just about sailing, the topic itself, so for me being an English major, I went to like JSTOR library databases, but also I wanted to find as many images and videos as I could. And I was really fortunate that Queen City has it all online, including that Centennial book I mentioned by William Lilly, which was just invaluable. And then all the maps and objects and exhibits and museums. I went to a lot of maritime museums, or the one in Kingston, one in France even, so anything I could get on this topic of sailing. Personal logs and records and logs became very valuable as well. I'll show you one that I used, as well as speaking to people at the club. It was really important for me to include like all the voices, as many people I could interview. Then I also needed material related to the craft of writing. Like, I've never written nonfiction before, so I read all these books on how to structure nonfiction. And then I also wanted to research the market too, like what did bookstores and libraries already have on the market about sailing in Lake Ontario. And there wasn't a lot really. There's a lot about the maritime history of Lake Ontario in terms of transportation and diesel and powered ships, but very little. There's some great books on that. Lots of books on Great Lakes wildlife, lighthouses even, but very little on actual like sailing, freshwater sailing. So this was one really great documentary I saw that features the Toronto Islands. So I actually went to this screening. It's made by a Toronto filmmaker named Elizabeth Littlehorn. So some of that material really helped. This is, I think, them sandbagging the north side of the club because we have to deal with a lot more flooding. I don't know if you guys have to deal with flooding here. I hope not. It's horrible. It's like so much work, but so that was a film that was a part of my research. So anything that I could find on this topic. So I think it's really important for all sailors to keep a logbook. you know, it doesn't have to be a very formal logbook, you know, formally, it's something that like documents every day your wind and weather conditions and all the events that take place on board, you know, the crew, the wind speed, course and whatnot. But I think informally could be just a diary of like a cruise or notes a day, because these have really great personal as well as yacht club historical value. So value for your own family, but also value to like the club you belong to, so that, you know, you record those things. So for me, I don't think it necessarily has to be written. It could be maybe a blog or journal. So this was the WordPress blog that Mark McRae made when he started sailing. So he kept this blog from around 2008 till maybe 2014. He kind of got tired of writing, and then he went and started filming. So I had this archive of every single race I ever did with him, which was fantastic because I couldn't remember. Literally, there were so many years, so many regattas. So with this blog, I was able to search through all the guys I'd taken, you know, what happened to them. And then in my mind, like the videos are also really helpful because sometimes in my mind, I had delayed getting up a jib pole for like, you know, several minutes. But when I watched the video, I'm like, oh, actually, it didn't take me that long. It just felt like a really long time because that stupid pole wouldn't scope out. So sometimes just having that record really confirmed it. And I also myself love this as a genre, especially one called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, which is a record for days spent in New England through the winter and then having a zero quiet writing life, which it serves. And also loved The Cure for Anything with Saltwater. Mary South is an American writer who bought a large kind of vintage diesel powered boat trawler of some kind. It seemed huge, but I'm sure she kept a sailing log because her details of going up the coast of Florida on that boat were just so detailed. So definitely, I think people should do this more, as well as conducting interviews. This is a project I've been meaning to do for a long time, but I've started to record my mom. She is the family kind of story keeper and storyteller, and she remembers everything. She's got a great memory. So I've been starting to record her telling me about family. Again, such great historical value and personal value to myself as well. She's in her 70s now. She's still very active. And so it was during one of these interviews that she told me that my great grandmother owned a what was known as a sampan boat, and she's kind of drawing it there. And that she lived on a houseboat, because I didn't know that, or she told me, I forgot. And that's kind of going to be a topic for my next book of like what that community in Hong Kong looked like. So that was really important for me to do, and it was really great to record interviews as well. I hope one day I can actually do a podcast of these stories from different yacht clubs and to just archive, especially some of the older folks as well. So this was kind of something I came across, was this map of the Toronto Purchase. Like I'd always heard of the Toronto Purchase, but I'd never actually seen the map itself. And this was done by this, I think the Lieutenant Surveyor General at the time. You can see his signature in the corner. And so that edge, the right edge shows the Lake Ontario, and the carrying place route stretches all the way up to Lake Simcoe. So that was a route that Indigenous peoples used to come down to the lake, or like a route, kind of like a portage route as well. And so it's amazing to think that Toronto had it being there is like the Toronto here that's kind of in this map, but this is actually sorry, my memory's bad because I'm a writer and I write everything down, but the remains of that is actually under C&E. They've come across the remains of that location. I think it was like a fort of some kind. Not Garrison Fort, but like a different fort that was like further north. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, you know, yeah. So I was like, that's so amazing. Again, lots of buried, everything in Toronto is buried. And then those are all the signatures. I love the little pictographs that Mrs. Algas made and wrote. I forget who signed this as well. I think it's like, yeah, if you need to know, you can find it on Nathan. I think it was the Minister for Indian Affairs at that time, but I'm not for sure. And then what I mentioned in my book was all the different Union stations we've had. And I didn't realize this because I guess when they built the first one, they didn't realize Toronto was going to grow so fast. And so that's the second Union Station, and the boathouses are kind of to the south of it. Very grand looking building, but for some reason, even when it was recently built, Toronto people didn't like it. There were a lot of complaints about it. They're like, it's too small, it's too awkward. So I'm like, that sounds familiar. You know, Toronto people always complaining about Union Station, even back at that time. It really struck me as a character of Toronto people that they're constantly dissatisfied. You know, they always want something better. And I think that is something I didn't realize with the city. And then that's a Grand Trunk Railway there. And then these maps of all the different wharves, like it must have been so hectic trying to get into one of these wharves, you know, and there were special wharves for special purposes. Like some of them were just for cargo, some of them were just with passenger. So you can imagine maybe the noise and the smoke and the mess from that as well. So that was kind of fascinating. And what was really helpful for me is that I found on the Toronto Public Library, as well as to Toronto Archives, these Toronto City directories. And Toronto had a small enough population, especially in 1870s, that these directories probably only had, I think the population of Toronto at that time was probably like under 50,000 people. So doing a search for Clendening really also made him alive for me. So his father was a boat builder, and there's like an ad that he made, and then he became a boat builder. But the real challenge of trying to find him, you know, as a person, I found his death record as well, was that names back then, everyone was named John or William, you know, so trying to parse these initials, and they really like to use like first and middle name initials. So I would find multiple like people the same. Fortunately, this was like a easier last name to find, but everyone was named Thomas. You know, it was just so hectic. But you could see on the left, like all the, oh, Alexandra was a really common one too. You could see exactly where they lived and where they moved. And so when W.H. Clendening married at like 21, he moved out and lived with his wife. So these were great to kind of pour through as well. Great that they've digitized them all. It makes it really easy to do research. I was also very curious as the type of boat that they were sailing in the 1880s and into the 1990s. So I found some of these images, but I saw the description from a club archivist at Royal Canadian Yacht Club. He said that the really popular choice was this double-ended skiff. And so the plans on the left is a boat called Clio, which won the 16-foot skiff class in 1887. So that's a plan. And that we don't know if this boat is similar to that, but it looks very similar. I think that probably Clio was quite narrower and kind of a bit stubbier. But, you know, I was very curious as to what does a double-ended skiff look like and how, you know, how it be sailed. And then there's also the Lake Sailing Skiff Association, who have restored the Ackroyd dinghies, which were also sailed at that period. So you can see just how, I think they're gaff rigged, just how big the sails are, how low they are to the water. But it required, Steiner was saying it requires a lot of seamanship, a lot of athleticism, that you have to be really fit and really strong to sail these boats, which makes sense because if, like, you know, all these are young men who maybe do a lot of labor outside, or you know, you have to survive like 1880s Canada. I think they had to be pretty fit to do that. So these skiffs were like, oh no, he describes it as no longer than 16 feet overall, 4 feet beam, be rigged as schooners, flying topsails, and tremendous sail area generally, or as sloops with 8-foot bowsprits and 16-foot spinnaker booms and main booms to match. So it's just terrifying to imagine just these huge boats kind of having to manage that in heavy wind, but very impressive, I think. Yeah, so this was an image of the boathouses that originally housed Clendening Road, and I hadn't realized that, you know, there was such these beautiful buildings. So I'm guessing these are also the club houses of Royal, of Toronto Canoe Club, and Argonaut as well. And so I definitely found it really useful to have old like newsletters and magazines from yacht clubs as well. They were really, really useful, giving me a sense of like the social activity. And so this was the map I finally found that had the boathouses kind of shown. So you can see Union Station. So this map was really incredible because the person who had uploaded it by a grid. So he didn't just upload the whole map, he scanned in every grid of it. So I could really get a very detailed look. And so at the very bottom is you could see it in faint pencil, like boat builder, boat houses. So that was the only map I could see of that had mention of boat houses that were south of Union Station. So I was kind of, like the story of the club having to move so often really seemed very familiar to me. And again, like Toronto people are constantly having to find new homes, cheaper homes, they're like, it's really a city of tenants because there's so little property. So I love this map because it was so hand drawn and hand colored. And it needed to be this detailed because it's a fire insurance map. So if a fire broke out, they could locate exactly where that fire was. So they could like make a call, I don't know, they could send a messenger and say there's a fire right at the cycle round. And they also marked the locations of where all the fuel was stored. So that's a fuel shed or that's gasoline shed, or it was really incredible, the detail and like the amount of work that went into this map. So this is available online through oldtorontomaps.blogspot.com. Yeah, so these are images of the clubhouse. That was when it was first built. So there's the image of the dinghy that's also gaff rig, very kind of similar to, I think it looks like a very similar to Ackroyd dinghy. Doesn't look like there's much wind, but a little bit. And that's the image that appeared in Toronto Daily Star of the clubhouse having crashed due to the pilings. Yeah, it's so unfortunate because it's a beautiful arts and crafts style clubhouse with a big veranda all around, but they got to enjoy it for about 18 years before it collapsed. Yeah, it's so sad. And then this is the clubhouse that was built on Ward Island afterwards. Tommy World, the Commodore at the time, was very concerned that they lose members. So he just really tried to finance this building as quickly as possible. I think they had to actually raise money through the members again. Finances of the club were just hilarious, the way they would try to finance things. But I love this photo. I had a green roof at the time. I think this might even been a little bit of I see a veranda on this. I know the veranda didn't come into a little bit later. So I think this photo is from 1939 of the clubhouse that was built in 1921. But it's just fascinating just to see there's no like moorings, I don't know what this wooden dock might have been the ferry dock. Yeah, and this beautiful boat looks like they're kind of coming out of the lagoon. The ducks are narrowly missing the rowers. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing I just marveled at. I love looking at these photos. It was so interesting to me. I believe the first floor of the clubhouse was actually for dinghies, the dinghy sheds, and later on we converted it to our snug and the restaurant, the offices and things like that. Yeah. And so, sorry, there's a bit of a typo. So this was an article, I end my essay with this article. I saw in Urban Toronto that they uncovered all these old wooden pilings in 2014 when they were building a big Tridel building. And so the writer of that article thinks it's Tinnings Wharf. But Tinnings Wharf, I found, was actually demolished. So it couldn't have been Tinnings Wharf. So Richard and I were trying to figure out like what these pilings were. And we think that it's actually the old Argonaut Rowing Club wharf that was kind of dug up. So it was kind of fun working with Richard or just emailing him about kind of sleuthing our way through this information through old maps. Yeah. So it's lots of fun. Kind of felt like a bit of an amateur historian. It's just incredible to think of what else could be buried down there that we don't know about. So I didn't realize that this would be the location of where the lake used to be. Right? And I didn't realize that everything else has been filled in since then. So like the city's landscape, like we've changed it so much in even just within a century. Yeah. So that was kind of, I just wanted to give a little bit in terms of book market research. If you're interested in writing your own memoir, I really modeled my books after what I talk about when I talk about running, by the Japanese novelist Haruki Murakami. I read this book about 10 years ago, and he made a parallel between running and the writing life. And I'm not a runner at all, but I love this memoir about how he kind of like persevered through running marathons, and what that meant for him. And I love also a book by Jessica Lee. She's a Toronto writer, and she writes about swimming. So she wrote about swimming in around Berlin in the countryside. She'd bike out to like a lake and go wild swimming. And she did that all year round, even in the winter. Although she said, admittedly, in the winter, she just would dip in like a cold plunge for a couple of minutes, and before getting out. And then it was a way for her to process, I think, her divorce at the time. And Alexander Chee's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel is really great. So what I did was I would just search through this really great website called Catalyst. It's by Booklet Canada, and it shows all the books that are about to be published in Canada, the catalogs. But I could do a search for them and see what else, I'd not known about. So this book like Project Mayflower or Sailing Alone, got added to my reading list. I just wanted to understand the book market a little bit. I think it's really important for anybody running and publishing, just to know how your book fits in or might be filling a gap. Definitely research like really involve the community. This is a typical, I think we did launch, end of the launch weekend, so I can see everyone holding a beer. For me, research also meant really valuing the relationships I formed in this community and getting to know people. So respecting people's confidentiality. So asking permission if I was going to mention them, or emailing them, giving them a heads up that I mentioned them. If I hadn't had time to do that, then I only mentioned people by first names. As well, I knew a lot of members with health problems, maybe dealing with some addiction, alcoholism, that I really wanted to respect their privacy. The trickiest part for me was somebody's child who at that time identified as male, but since the writing a book became like she identified as female, and so no longer used the name I had. So that was one kind of inaccuracy. I had to respect her preference to be named using her, the name she had chosen for herself rather than the name she used previously. So that was something I had to I had to email their parents about. Unfortunately, I had a good relationship with her parents, to navigate, like, how did this, otherwise not mentioning her because she crewed on her dad's boat felt like an erasure. I didn't want to like not mention her at all, which would have been the easy thing to do. So that was like a learning experience for me. So I'm very independent as I'm more a writer, but I think being part of Yacht Club has really made me value other people's stories and perspectives as well, even when they like disagree with me. And then I truly tried to deal with this topic matter with a decolonial anti-racist approach, which didn't mean rejecting history, but to see the history through a different lens, like accepting the history and questioning it, especially some of the in a way that would always improve our community. So I'm involved with a group called Canadian Asian Sailors. A couple of them are members at National as well. And we are trying to just make sailing a bit more accessible for people. And what we do is that we're a mix of people who have, like, Pepe's like a sailing instructor. He's got a lot of experience. We're a mix of people who have a lot of experience and people who are complete newcomers. And all we do is we just go around to we visit each other's clubs. So we've done a dinner at National, we've done a dinner at Queen City, we've done a lot of dinners at Royal, which is okay, because like I end up spending more time at Royal Canadian Yacht Club than I really want to, but that's all right. And so it just gives those newcomers to the sport an opportunity to socialize and to come out on the water when we can sign out a boat. And so that's kind of one way, it's a really enjoyable way. And I think it's a little bit like this club, we have our own, like, we have about 30 or 40 members, so we just started. So it's kind of a way to bring newcomers to the sport, yeah. Yeah, because a lot of them are like the only Asian at their yacht club, so it's been great for them to connect with each other as well. Some of them seem more interested in eating and drinking than actually sailing, but that's okay. That's really okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's it for me. This is a kind of photo of my research process. I was writing an essay on maritime art. My parents are both artists, so I love maritime art, but I also have, so I want to question that tradition a little bit. I'm a big fan of Turner. So I was really enjoying my time in Vancouver Public Library, just researching like Dutch maritime painting, the origins of it. And it's really fascinating too, because England was at war with Netherlands at the time of the heyday of Dutch maritime painting, but I believe the king at that time actually asked two maritime painters from the Netherlands to come and found the School of Maritime Art. So art triumphs over war, and I really love that story. It was something I learned. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. Talked enough.
Oh.
Yeah.
100%. Let's give her a nice round of applause. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's so kind of you. Yeah.
Do we have any questions or
Yeah.
comments? Ron?
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see you digging into the past of the
Mhm.
Queen City Yacht Club. I've done a little bit of that for national. Because this location is the third or the fourth location of national, depending on how you want to count.
Uh-huh.
And it's, national is sitting on land that didn't exist. 40 years ago, this location. And then, its previous location was over just where the condos are here. And that location didn't exist in 1890 when National was over at where Lakeshore and Bathurst started now.
Yep.
And the only sort of pinpoint that I can find of the original National location is in the GOAT atlases that you commented about.
Yes.
Those fire insurance
Yeah.
maps.
They're so detailed.
They're so detailed, they're very useful.
Uh-huh.
See actual properties like individual houses and so on.
Yeah.
That granular area. I was talking recently about Hampton, where you could also see all of the residences that were on the sandbars.
Yeah.
In the airport now. And so, yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Feedback.
Yeah.
You would be interested in going back to some of our past presentations. Ron has done a huge number of presentations, 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And
great.
he does an amazing amount of research, just like
Yeah,
you.
so- and I find it's really important even now to document everything. Like, even if you're just going out for like a drink with this, like a group of people after sailing, because Richard C has a lot of trouble pinpointing when certain club traditions and rituals started. But if you mention, oh, we decided to do like an informal dinner, or we decided to all dress up and have like a silly tuxedo dinner, that sometimes becomes a tradition in a year or two. You just to mention it in your journal or diary, or to photograph everything, right? For your kids and grandkids, because like this landscape is changing as we speak. Like it's not going to look like this. So now I started doing that. I started doing that with the condos being built around my parents' condo in Richmond. Every year when I went back to visit them in Christmas, I started taking photos of the condo development, which I later turned into like a poetry like series. It was so valuable just to have those images of what every stage of construction process looked like. So like we need to document for the future. Like
That's true.
Yeah, like starting
That's
now,
true. And I think one of the
So
things that
important.
you did for us today is you walked us through how to write a book.
Yes, I
And
really wanted to do that.
that was
Yeah.
awesome. Judith, you had your hand up.
And this is actually a question for both Phoebe and Ron, because as soon as Phoebe said it, Ron pinpointed the location. That's about the dig that uncovered all the Tridell dig for a new building, that uncovered all the island.
Yeah.
The supports, the wharf, and you said right away, oh yeah, that's in the X, so we're right near that.
Yeah, there's two locations. That one is the one near York Street in Simcoe, and I just learned today. So I was looking closer at that map, and like, where is this like Toronto? That's at the CNE. So who knows how many more locations there are of like,
Well, I live in Mark.
right? Yeah.
And they were building, set of 5 buildings, which turned out to be the very last affordable housing building built in Ontario. And as they were digging it, and it's right across the street from the South Market, what it was, the South Market building. And it was this huge wharf.
Yeah.
Was there, and so every day I would walk by this thing and it just kept digging it out, digging it out, and it went down quite a bit.
Yes.
But it was huge.
Yeah.
Because the keel of the ships had to be.
Wow, that's
accommodated
incredible.
to
You saw
get
it in
in,
person.
and then, and this Market Street is shaped like this because that's where they used to come right in. I
Wow.
mean, that, I would never have known that except for the fact that I
Yeah.
watched the video.
Yeah.
George has got his hand up.
Oh.
Go ahead, George. I think you have to unmute yourself.
I have done that. I was very interested in you uncovering some of the background of the Argonaut Rowing Club. That made me go to the cupboard and bring out my trophy. This is my father-in-law's trophy from the Argonaut Rowing Club. And it's won by Mr. McIntyre, Mr. Dixon, and Mr. Forrest, with T.R. Jones as stroke. He's my father-in-law, and he won this trophy in 1902.
That's incredible. Wow. That's beautiful.
So I don't know where the Argonaut Rowing Club was in 1902, but I now know how to find out.
Yeah. It's buried in the tried out building.
Norton.
I was gonna ask, did you look at RCYC archives
Yeah, a little bit, just online.
and did
Yeah.
you look at, Harbor Commission, Toronto Port Authority?
No, I haven't. It was just a challenge because my book, I only devote about 10 pages to it, and it's just like the amount of material, because Sally Gibson had the whole book on Toronto Islands as well, and the Centennial book is like 200 pages. So for me, it was like just selecting one piece, just the clubhouse that could be a lens to other things. But hopefully I can write more about at a later date as well.
Yeah, you will find some stuff on the Shellback website and blog posts.
Okay. That's great.
Actually,
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, yeah.
it's the accurate thing, some of them are still sailing on still today, but they were built right on the waterfront central one.
Yeah. So that was something actually I found out after finishing writing the book, because for this presentation, I was like, let's try to find some images of these boats. Yeah.
Mr. McNaughton.
Yeah, just two things. One, on the Harbor Commission's archives, they have an incredible photography.
Oh,
Archive.
yeah.
And they have a marvelous index to them, and they're fine at one point. And I was going through the index and making notations on a whole bunch of fascinating photos that I wanted to look at.
Yeah.
And when I went to look for them, I found they weren't there. And I asked about them, and they said, well, we had someone in doing research. We didn't realize to take of all of the photographs. A whole bunch of them. And when they died, their widows donated all these photographs to the National Archives in Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
But the National Archives won't give them back.
Oh, no.
They have our session number written on the back of them.
Oh, that's so irritating. At least they're in safe hands, though.
Mentioned the magnetic observatory.
Yeah.
Did you get into the relationship between that magnetic observatory and the Franklin expedition?
I have written about the Royal Observatory in a poem before, but the Franklin expedition is something, definitely very fascinating to me. Someone reimagined that a romance novel where they brought them back into the future. I think her name's Colleen Bradley. So that was really fun to learn. But yeah, Franklin, I've seen some of the artifacts from the expedition in the Royal Navy Museum in Greenwich. in Greenwich Media House, but that's a whole other area of, I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Quite a fascinating
Yeah, yeah.
story, because one of the, they were searching for the Franklin expedition, they're starting to find where they had the debris, I'll call it,
yeah.
that they had left behind. Story started that there was various curtains, or curtain blocks.
That's crazy.
They couldn't understand why they were carrying curtain blocks.
Yeah.
In fact, they weren't curtain blocks, they were tiffany.
Oh, yes, yes.
The Royal Navy had figured out that very quickly that a magnetic compass was quite useless when we get up into the Arctic. It's not going north anymore. And they decided they could do experiments with the magnetic field.
Uh-huh.
And the nature of the magnetic field will tell them where they were.
Wow.
Opposed to a compass.
Uh-huh.
And so what Franklin's expedition was doing, part of what they were doing, were always rooting more magnetic, finding the magnetic dipping
Wow.
that they were coming with. And of course, they would record all this on paper. And as they were dying off, the English company they would open these boxes. And of course, paper was unknown to them, and certainly what was on it made no sense whatsoever to them
Uh-huh.
at all. And so the paper was just blowing off and disappeared. And would have disintegrated in the letter within a year or so.
Wow.
Jim, you have a comment to add here?
I was really struck by the Toronto purchase. Could you explain what that was?
Yeah, so that was
Who owned the land and who bought it?
well, it was Mississaugas, I think, at that time, plus a number of other nations. So that was and I think they bought it for something like $2 at that time, which is why we negotiated the Toronto Treaty in 2007, I think. Yeah.
So who bought and who sold?
Well, the British Crown at that time would have bought it, and then sold it would have been whoever signed that Toronto Purchase Treaty, which would probably be the Mississaugas at the time, maybe Senecas as well. Yeah, yeah.
Why do they have to buy it?
Well, it was a kind of a bit of it wasn't really buying, it was more like a treaty, right? They were paying for the use of the land. But I think there was a misunderstanding. I think the British thought they were buying it. But I think the Mississaugas thought they were like, no, this is an agreement that we are now entering together to take care of this land. Right? And so, yeah.
Aboriginal approach.
I mean, they didn't speak English, right? And they didn't speak Mississauga or Anishinaabe. So there was definitely lots of,
I
Yeah.
have a really funny bit of history that I came across
uh-huh.
with the technology of writing. Socrates.
Anyway, let's sit down and eat. Yeah.
I think so, I
Yeah.
think so. And you can continue this conversation.
I'm hungry.
This is very
Like,
short.
we're all hungry, but I'd like to say thank you with a little token of appreciation.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yes, and just to finish off, thank you, Phoebe. Let's give her just another round of applause. It's
Thank you, thank you.
wonderful.
Drop your pen.
I know. And so just taking a look at what's coming up. Next week, we have Bill Hutton, who spoke to us many years ago about schlepping a boat up from the south, from the Caribbean up to Toronto. And he's coming along with a 3-year adventure in Georgian Bay and the North Channel. And then on March the 5th, Mike Lee will talk about the Kids and Classics Boat Shop Museum, where they work with, it's a year-round campus with programming for many objectives, including working with youth at risk, family boat building, maritime career studies, and boat regattas and restoring old boats.
Wow.
They were at the boat show, if any of you saw them. So he will be along in 2 weeks. And so with that, pipes out.